Good morning, everyone. Sorry we're starting a few minutes late, but we're here. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our second webinar in our Suncoast Spotlight series. I'm Sarah Serafini, Suncoast Student Production Awards Committee Chair, and I'm very excited to kick off today's session. Before we begin, I want to give just a couple of quick updates and reminders. So first, call to entries for the Student Production Awards will begin on January 15th, and the details can be found on our website. Additionally, every year it's our mission to give back and help students grow and excel in their careers through our Student Scholarship Program and the Bob Barron Scholarship Award. Last year, we awarded over $78,000, and this year, the application will open up on February 1st. So again, please be sure to check it out on our website. Without further ado, I am pleased to introduce Pam Giganti, host of Your South Florida PBS, and our facilitators, Omar Delgado, who's the Educational Technology Specialist at Christopher Columbus High School, and Mia Lorenzo, producer at WLRN. During today's session, we do ask that you submit your questions in the YouTube chat space with your full name and your school information. Pam, over to you.
Sarah, thank you so much. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this incredible session that we have planned out for you today. It's going to be very, very informative and help you as you get ready to launch into the broadcast journalism industry. It's so important to know that you're doing a good job with your resumes, your cover letters, and reels. We know that you all have a lot of questions, so we're going to hopefully get to all of them today. And you know what, guys, bottom line, and we know that there can be a lot of anxiety as you head into this industry. Many of you might be seniors and you're working really hard and trying to put that reel together and you just don't know what direction to go in. Well, I think today you're going to get a lot of great information about how to put that reel together, about the things that news directors are looking for and how to really make that impact. Because let's be frank, they are looking at a lot of reels and they are popping them in and out, and you want to make an impact. And you also want to have them to remember you. You also want them to know that you are the right person for that job, whether they are looking for an MMJ, maybe they're looking for a feature reporter, a sportscaster, whatever it might be. So we're really excited that you're here. Pat yourself on the back. Congratulations for joining us today, because that means you really care about your future. So without further ado, I'm going to talk a little bit about who I am and how I got into this industry. And then we're going to introduce the panelists as well. And they're going to tell you a little bit about themselves and their career in this industry as well. And remember, throughout all of this, you're able to ask questions, and we're going to get to as many of them as possible. So my name is Pam Giganti. I've been in the industry a long time. I know I look young, but I've been in the industry 31 years. Just kidding. But I started back when I was in college. I graduated college from the University of West Florida in Pensacola back in 1991 with a degree in communication arts and an emphasis in broadcast journalism. So clearly the industry has changed so much since that time. We are digital now, which we weren't back then. So it has continued to evolve and will continue to evolve. You've probably seen so many changes just the few short years that you've been studying in college, because things change so rapidly. So one of the things that was really pivotal for me as a student is I actually worked at a local radio station. So I got a job behind the scenes actually answering telephones for a radio show. That led to me actually getting an on-air position. That's when cell phones were first coming out. There were these huge bricks. They actually had a strap. You would almost carry the phone like a purse. And my program director figured out how to take the handset off and put a microphone on. And he literally sent me out to start covering events that were happening in the community, like a walk or a telethon or some special event. And that's how I got my start. I was 21 years old and I had this radio show called Out and About with Pam Giganti. And that really helped launch me. It was radio. I did want to be in television, but I was grabbing as much experience as I could because I knew that that was important. I ended up moving to San Diego and I had my reel, and my reel was really just the work that I had done in college. So it was rough to say the least, but I was really banking on my radio experience. And I ended up getting a job out there at an AM FM radio station called KKLQ. And at that time, And I was able to kind of take advantage of the opportunity is that the first Gulf War had started and this station was doing reports every hour on the hour. So they hired me for that. And I literally went out and started doing reports as a radio reporter and really got my feet wet doing that. And looking back, it was such a great experience because in radio, you don't have the advantage of video to tell your story. So you have to be very colorful in your language and become a really good storyteller. So I worked as a radio reporter. I worked as a traffic reporter, ended up moving to South Florida and just used a contact that I knew somebody at WSVN. And I said, you know, can you help make an introduction for me? And I did that. And it was from that opportunity that I was able to work at WSVN. And then I was able to move on and work at WTVJ. And I was there for 15 years as their morning anchor. So there's definitely more to the story, but a lot of it was just taking advantage of the opportunities that presented themselves to me. And I think that's what's most important is taking advantage of those opportunities. Don't saying no to something. I was actually a weather reporter for a while. I never thought in my life I would be a weather reporter, but the opportunity arose and I said, okay, I'm going to give it a try. And that allowed me to get in front of my news director and show her what I got. So there are stories like that. Nobody's journey is the same. But I think the most important thing to walk away with, and I used to tell this to my students, was attitude plus opportunity equals success. Attitude plus opportunity equals success. You have to have a good attitude as well and say, yeah, I'm willing to try that. I'll give it a go. If I had never said I'll do the weather, I never would have become the anchor that I became. So it's just taking advantage of those opportunities. All right. I want to turn things over now to somebody else who is one of our panelists today, who is also starting off in the business and has a lot of great information for you, particularly about your reel, and that's Victor Georges. He's a multimedia journalist from KATC TV. Hey, Victor.
Hey, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, Pam. Very, very useful information. And basically, I don't want to repeat everything she said, but that's really the reality of it. It's a tough, I mean, I don't even know because I start on Monday, my first day as a journalist, and it's really a dream come true. But what got me here is exactly what we're going to talk about today, which is your reel, your cover letter, and your resume. And it's kind of like that first handshake. It's so important. Obviously, right now we're not doing handshakes because of COVID, but it's so important that, you know, the grammar, everything. If you want the colors to match, they need to match perfectly. Your reel, everything is so important, and it's so much attention to detail. Everybody will tell you the same thing. News directors are sitting here just like they already know what they want, and you're just hoping that you're that thing that they're looking for. So you have to make sure that everything is perfect so that nothing kind of takes you out of that list of things that they might be looking for. A little bit about myself. I'm Venezuelan. I moved here in 2007, and I started producing content pretty early in high school. And I used to compete a lot. I used to run a lot of the shows at my school. And essentially, all of that stopped mattering the second you entered college. But maybe like the awards and stuff didn't matter anymore. But all the experience and all the knowledge I had from those competitions and from those moments of, you know, producing content, those skills were still obviously within me. So from there, I started producing a documentary. It's a 36-minute documentary about a fashion designer. And that took me kind of, not all over the world, I wish, but I went to some countries in South America. I went to Bolivia. I went to New York Fashion Week, which was really, really cool. I went to Dominican Republic. And I kept doing that because, as many of you may know, if you're in college, you don't start producing content until later on in your college career. So for those first 2 years, while I was essentially doing my AA, on the side, I was doing this documentary. And again, just always producing content. Then you enter those like journalism related classes. I went to FIU, I forgot to say, but I went to Florida International University, majored in broadcast journalism. And then, so you get into those classes of just kind of producing content for a grade, which is never really fun, but you have to do it. So then I started working for the student paper, which is one of the coolest things I got to do. I got to cover really, really, really beautiful things like the South Beach Food and Wine Festival. I interviewed somebody else for National Geographic. So it was pretty cool. And then I internet CNN en Español, which was really, really fun.
I just let him in. I admitted him in.
And then
and then I let Pam know that he's on now.
I entered at Discovery Channel Latin America, And then I worked at WSBN as a news writer in the graveyard shift, which was tough, but it worked, and I learned a lot. And then during this whole time, I was working on my reel, my resume, my cover letter, which is what we're actually here to talk about. And then I landed this job. I know it sounds like, he went from job to job to job to job to job. But, that's what you see, but that's not what really happened. I applied to over 60 jobs to get this dream job of a multimedia journalist at KATC. And I mean, here we are. I started Monday, and towards the end of the panel, you guys can take my email down, my number, my social media, and I'll be happy to share anything that I do that with you guys. And then I'll pass it over to you, Pam.
All right, George, thank you. Victor, thank you so much. And now I'd like to introduce Craig Stevens. Craig is our moderator for today. A little hangover from 2020, 2021, a few technical difficulties, but Craig, we're so happy that we finally have you. And I'm going to turn the moderator duties back over to you. Great to see you.
Pam, thank you so much, and great to see you. And those of you I'm able to see and hear from so far, thank you so much. Actually, my technical issues bring to mind a point that we'll explore as we move on this afternoon, and the importance of not only having access to the most current and up-to-date equipment, but knowing how to use it. That becomes very important as you search for work, which we'll talk about in greater detail with Victor. Thank you, Pam, for getting us started. An old friend, and always good to see you. Ken Bennett is here with us also. He's going to be fielding some questions, a veteran of the television news industry, both working for many years in newsrooms and at the academic end of things as well. Ken, good morning. Good to have you. Tell us a little bit about you as we get started.
Thank you, Craig. You may have heard the expression, life is short, eat dessert first. So rather than review my entire history, which dates back 61 years, I started in broadcasting at the age of 14 or so. I want to talk to you about some concepts that you'll see as we field questions and look at all the elements for cover letters and resumes. You'll have some of these things in the back of your mind. So first of all, I had 3 careers: broadcast journalism, then media news consulting, and then teaching at the college level. I'm now retired, but I'm still mentoring hundreds, if not thousands, of former students and colleagues and people that I met at stations along the way. So I want to give you some bullet points. First of all, know that versatility is a competitive edge. Consider offering, assuming that it's possible and you've got the training for it, offering yourself as a one-person newsroom. You can do everything. All the platforms, every duty, in front of a camera, behind the camera, not even with a camera. Offer an open mind, a strong work ethic, and affirm that your word is your bond. That's integrity. These things are very important. Writing skills, they're important, but the kind of personal assets that you bring to the table are also very important, and they're differentiating. Not everybody's even going to talk about them. See if you're biased. What? Yeah, see if you're biased. This is a technique that I used in the classroom and in the newsroom. Ask someone to tell us why they're in favor of something, a very controversial topic. So then tell them, write a 1-minute essay or a commentary or whatever, telling us why I should do this or should do that. And then they do that. And I listen, and now I want you to write the opposite viewpoint. And I'm going to grade both. And I needed them to come out equal or close to it. So there are things that you as a reporter may not believe in, may not like, may not want, may be sickened by. But that doesn't mean that that's part of your journalism. That may be part of a Q&A. So consider, are you biased? And once upon a time, we used to say, we're striving for objectivity. And that later said, you know what, objectivity is a myth. Well, it may be, but I still see it as an ideal and a gift. Think early and seriously about your personal finances. Save for retirement. Really? In my first job? Yeah. Make sure that you keep a good credit rating, pay off your loans, especially the student ones. People may check your financial background when they're looking to hire you, and they want to make sure that you might not be fully mindful. You might not be able to give 100% because you're already overloaded. You don't want to be showing them they might take any shortcuts. You might stay fit mentally and physically. Sometimes your job is a marathon. You go for days. You may go for continuous 48 hours, 72 hours. You just have to be able to have the stamina. I have a friend at the Weather Channel, Mike Seidel. He's in his 60s. He goes all over the country covering bad weather. And I don't know how he does it. He stays very fit. So that's an example of, you just can't let yourself go physically and mentally. Scrub your social media. It's one of the first things that a potential employer may do. They may be impressed by your resume, but they're going to check you out quickly because they've got so many, they want to reject as many people as possible. And that's one way to do it. And one bad picture, one bad comment. So see your marketing tool, whatever your social media, see it as a marketing tool and eliminate anything that you're not going to have an opportunity to explain. And always remember that the difference between social media and news media is the fact that in social media, we don't see people vetting their stories. But in journalism, you vet, you verify, you go through the editorial process. And you need to understand that that's a difference between what you may be doing now casually. So that's the dessert. I'll be back for more of the main course.
Thanks, Ken, so much, very much. Some really important points there, and we can explore some of those as we move forward. I really want to dive right into the first part of this, cover letters and resumes, because it's a very important part, obviously. You know, it's your introduction in some cases, before they ever click the link to watch your work and to see all that great stuff you've done in school, and perhaps you've had other means to create a resume reel. Before they see the reel, they want to know a little bit about you, and they're important. And I'd say this, our objective, and I think Pam probably talked about this earlier, was to explore some of the techniques that will help you in that regard, but also some of the pratfalls, things you want to avoid to not make the mistake, to not get them to watch you reel. I'm reminded of the first boss I ever had, and it was in a market much like where Victor is now. It was a smaller market. My first opportunity to work on television, I was an MMJ, and it was a coveted position. It's very competitive. She would post an opening for a reporter, an MMJ, and she'd get up to 150, if not more, resumes. So she was always looking for a reason not to watch a reel. And one of her first reasons, if in the cover letter you misspelled her name was Sherry. We all know as Sherry, S-H-E-R-R-Y, maybe an I. She was C-H-E-R-E. And if you spelled her name incorrectly, she would toss the work aside. If I can't trust them to get my name spelled right, how can I trust them to cover the mayor or cover what happened at the sheriff's office or whatever? If you got her title wrong. So right off the bat. Secondly, if it felt like a boilerplate letter, I know it's kind of hard to crank out letter after letter, but as best you can, customize them. If you're writing to Pocatello versus if you're writing to Panama City, different areas, different stories. Act like you're actually vaguely familiar with the region and the job for which you're applying. The internet makes that easier. So having said that, Victor, and again, we're starting to get some questions in, so fantastic. We'll get to the questions about the reels when we get to the reels in a few minutes. But first, I really want to focus on cover letters and the resume itself. Victor, what did you find when you put together, well, first of all, tell us how many jobs you may, if you got into this before I was able to get on, I apologize. How many jobs had you applied for? And that might surprise a lot of folks. And what did you do to try to make your cover letter stand out?
All right, so I applied for around 60 jobs. And I mean, I would say that took over like 6 months. I started a little bit before graduation, and then I graduated, and then I kept applying. Because even though I loved it at Channel 7 as a writer, that it wasn't my dream. I wanted to, be on camera, tell stories. So I just kept applying. And then in terms of cover letter and resume, for the cover letter, always make sure that you're sending it to the right station, because that's another thing. Because you have to put, depending on what format you're using, on top you're putting like where you're from, like where you are, and then where it's going, So where it's going, make sure that you put the right station, that there's no mistakes in the address, like Craig was saying about the name. That's huge. Like these people are about to trust you about, like, you know, local government people, like stories. You want to make sure that you're not making those mistakes and like presenting yourself, you know? So that's huge. And then in the way I did my cover letter, I kind of essentially rewrote my resume, but adding more details and maybe emphasizing one of the, or combining. I had two cover letters. The first one was about the documentary that I spoke about. The second one is about, because if you're applying to be a multimedia journalist, you have to be able to do everything. So I combined my experience at Discovery Channel at CNN. So Discovery Channel, obviously scripted content, a lot of editing, a lot of, you know, like graphics and music, and it's more like entertainment. And then I worked at CNN, which is the complete opposite. So then that was my cover. That's how I presented myself. I can do both. I know how to entertain. I know how to tell the news. So that's my 2 cents on that. Make sure that you're taking the thing that you're the proudest of in your resume and expanding on that in your cover letter. That's the technique that worked for me.
All right, Victor, thank you. What about the idea of references? Sometimes, because as Pam and I know you've seen, and Ken, you've been on the receiving end of it, when folks will send material, and I think maybe because they've seen it somewhere, they'll go with references available upon request. Ken, if you ever got that, what was your view if you got with all due respect, because we've all been a 22-year-old kid getting out of school, but if you, from the 22-year-old looking to start out, and you get the cover letter and the resume, and you're going to watch the reel in a minute, references available upon request. Thumbs up, thumbs down, Ken.
It's a pain in the somewhere, because you're wasting my time. Now you're asking me to go do something else, ask you for more. No. And so give me your references and give me the information that I need to check them out. The phone call, the email, whatever. Give me a little information on what it is they know about you. Was it a teacher who supervised your capstone project, et cetera, et cetera. But save me time. Imagine that your resume is one of 200. And they're going to watch it or look at the cover letter only until they're bored by it. And that can happen in the first sentence. But they're always going to look to just see, are you writing in an interesting way? Your cover letter should be one of the best things you've ever written. And I would always subject it to the review by teachers and people who've supervised you in internships and other kinds of things. Because we think of the reel, and sure, that's visual and oral, AURAL, but it's that cover letter that may be the first reason that they're either going to watch your reel or the first reason that they're not going to watch your reel. So again, make that point of saving time, give your references, and I might want to watch your reel, and then I'm going to call them. So again, make sure your references know you're using them as references. I mean, it needs to be somebody who actually does know your work, not who had so many students, and especially now with remote learning, do they really know you? Would they be able to pick you out of a mugshot file?
Thanks, Ken. That's exactly where I would have gone with that. Don't make, news directors are busy people. Don't make more work for them. Have the cover letter, the resume, the references. Make sure, as Ken outlined, you've asked if it's okay. And when you provide a reference, make sure you give a current phone number or a current email, because nothing's more annoying for a news director who says, oh, let me call Professor Smith, who so-and-so had, and they're no longer teaching at that school. They're at a different school now, or it's the wrong email. Then it's not a good reference. And again, it just shows poor follow through on your end. And I'd add too, because I've had calls from former students, references, and they hadn't asked my permission. Now, I wouldn't want to sandbag somebody, but ordinarily, if I know a call is coming, I have time to look up what grade they earned in the class. I can review whatever work they might have done for me, and just got to get it fresh in my memory so I can answer whatever questions. If it's someone I haven't thought of, I don't remember, I'm not sure their grade, which means they might not have been a standout for me, it'll be an okay reference. They felt strongly enough to use me, but it might not be a great reference. So again, your due diligence is important there. Real quick, what about on, I think suffice it to say, 1 page for a cover letter. We don't need 4 pages of your greatest hits. save that for the holiday card you mass produce and send out to your relatives, what you did for the last year. What about though, a lot of young people again? I was a server at Red Lobster. I stocked shelves at J. Crew. Okay, I mean, I have my thought. Pam, I'm curious to what you guys think. I will start with you. To me, my resume, when I was starting out, I really tried to focus on, even if they weren't paid jobs, but for 3 semesters, I worked at campus television. I wrote, I edited. It was practical experience. I might not have been paid, but I thought that might have been more compelling than the fact that when I was a freshman in high school, I worked at Red Lobster. Pam, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, obviously that you worked at Red Lobster and maybe you were a really good employee says a lot about who you are and your character. Perhaps maybe you use that manager you had, if you want, as a reference letter as to your great character. You always showed up on time. You were a good employee. But you need to get to the nuts and bolts of the job that you are seeking. Like you were saying, I want to see more, if I'm a news director, about the work that you are producing. And if that's all just from campus TV, then that's what I need to see. And I think if you're a student listening to this and your opportunity right now is just with your campus television or radio station, use that to your advantage. See if you can do more than what you're assigned to do. Get with a buddy or a partner, somebody, a fellow student, and say, hey, let's check out some equipment from the equipment room and let's go and do some extra stories, extra stand-ups. Let's enterprise something. That's going to mean more to me as a news director than you listing all of those extracurricular jobs that you had. Again, if you were a really great and outstanding employee and that says a lot about your character, I think I'd love to see that as a reference letter and as a character witness about who you are, because that's going to speak volumes about who you're going to be as an employee. You're going to show up on time. You may get to work early. You're going to be a hard worker, and that's important. But everything you said, Craig, absolutely. And I think what we have to remember too is everybody's so pressed for time. I mean, news directors, and correct me if I'm wrong, and Ken, maybe you can jump in on this. When they're looking to hire somebody, an MMJ, or maybe it's a sportscaster, they kind of have in their mind what they're looking for. And they're kind of honing in on that, correct?
Yes, I think it's important to first of all, you have to be honest. Don't oversell. Mm-hmm. But in a lot of the things that are in your resume, point out what was the person-to-person part of the job. In a sense, what was our customer service? An assignment editor has got to have those kinds of skills. I once took a call. It was forwarded to me in the newsroom because somebody wanted to talk to me. And it turns out he was holding hostages at a mental institution. And I'm glad that somebody forwarded the calls. You try to indicate that there's no job too small, no job too big, that you're conscientious, and that every viewer is a customer. And you look at the jobs you've held and perhaps give some point where you empowered. Did you create the empowerment to solve a problem within wherever you were working? So if you're going to have a listing, have a purpose for having that listing. Let it show something about you. And I think it's co-curricular activities, extracurricular, community kinds of things, the volunteer work. I looked for volunteer work. I wanted somebody who was well-rounded. And these days, with what's going on in our world, you must have interests beyond your occupation. You need to have a selfless attitude as opposed to a selfish one.
Thanks, guys, very much. Oh, Pam, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, quickly, I wanted to say something about the references. And I taught as an adjunct as well at the University of Miami for a few semesters in television performance. And I had several students who would want letters of recommendation. And clearly there were students who I had a great rapport with, who were very hard workers, really wanted, to get those first jobs. And I was more than happy to write them a letter of recommendation. And then there are students who really didn't put in the effort and asked me, and that's tough as a professor. So I think if you're watching this and you're thinking, who am I going to ask to write me a letter of recommendation? Establish a good rapport with that professor so that they are more than excited to write you a letter of recommendation.
Often you're
very fair point. Very fair point, Ken. I'm just going to jump in here real quick. Folks, thanks for tuning in. If you are not able to see the chat window, just refresh the YouTube page and that should fix it for you. So if you're having that issue, just refresh YouTube and you should be okay. I want to move into demo reels because obviously that's always the big thing. But I would leave this section with just this, and to amplify what Ken and Pam and Victor have said. You know, the cover letter and the resume should not be considered an afterthought. They should be given a good deal of thought for the reasons that we've outlined here. Obviously, they should be, in my view, customized. If you're writing to WMBB in Panama City versus WGGB in Springfield, Massachusetts, different regions, different sensibilities, different news philosophies. And if you can pick up on that in your cover letter, I think that will help set you apart from somebody else. The internet makes that easy. So again, shouldn't be an afterthought. Pay careful attention to your writing, the grammar, the customization. And I think that will give you a leg up, mainly because a lot of people don't do those things. Okay, the resume reels, how long should they be, and so on. And we're going to talk about all that stuff. But first, we're going to show you a little bit of one that helped land somebody a job. So if we can, let's look a little bit at a successful reel that scored somebody a job.
Right now we're in Miramar's Anson Park, but in approximately 5 minutes we'll be making our way down to the Miramar Town Center. Keep in mind that this is where the city's police department is headquartered. People here are protesting against police brutality, and that's exactly why some of the event's organizers wanted to hold part of the protest down at the town center. Now, if you can see right behind me, you can see hundreds of people have gathered here with signs, and they're all wearing masks, which is exactly what the organizers wanted. The city of Miami and South Florida in general has seen 16 consecutive days of protests against police brutality following the death of George Floyd. Film sets in Miami-Dade are required to follow county guidelines like social distancing, wearing a face mask, and limiting capacity to 50%. A Miami-based rescue task force deployed to Puerto Rico last month to help in the aftermath of the devastating 6.4 magnitude earthquake that struck the south of the island. Andrea Gonzalez tells us what they encountered in Puerto Rico. Hurricane Dorian is causing winds of up to 185 miles per hour, and it's moving west towards the Florida Peninsula at 7 miles per hour. All right, South Florida, as you're getting ready to go back to the beach, here's what you need to know. The new normal beach rules include no groups of more than 10, and you must always have a mask ready in case authorities ask you for one. Authorities are saying that a wet mask is not effective. The Miami-Dade County Office of Film and Entertainment was greenlit to resume giving film permits back in May. This is after 2 months of being put on pause due to the pandemic. Although this is a step forward for creatives, they're still forced to change the way they make movies.
Whether you're a writer, whatever you're doing, it's tough because, you know, it's very daunting to try to create in a time of crisis.
Local film producer Christy Trabada has chosen to see this as a time of growth.
I feel like whatever has happened is meant to happen, and these creative decisions that arise out of these complications and with the pandemic,
Okay, we wanted to give you a flavor of what it is. I'm sure Victor will share it with you if any of you want to see it in its entirety. Couple of questions, or first of all, a statement right off the bat. There's no right or wrong way to make a reel. Let's start that. It's highly subjective depending on who's watching the reel. I've been in situations where I had a boss look at a reel and think, yuck, only to see the person get hired at a crosstown television station. So it's really up to the taste of the person who's watching it. That said, however, there are some general themes that you tend to see in reels. As you saw with Victor, he began with a little bit of a montage. They want to see you. Who are you all about? How do you comport yourself on camera? Then the packages, they want to see how you organize your story. Do you write to your video? How do you use sound? And then perhaps at the end, maybe some studio work, anchoring or whatnot. That's a general way of approaching. But Victor, tell us, first of all, how long was your reel and how did you approach it when you created what you did?
Okay, so in total, my reel was 11 minutes, which is considered long. And I heard that from a couple of recruiters. But they always kind of ended the email saying like, it's long, but it's good. So that worked for me. I also had the way I approached it, like what you're looking at now is not the same. I have like 8 versions of my reels, just because every time I show it to someone and they tell me feedback, I'm like, all right, let me tweak that, let me tweak this. And then, but you also have to be careful that you're not working in circles. And you also have to tell yourself, okay, I'm gonna stop asking people and just start sending it. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be working on your reel and changing things how to they were 18 months ago when you asked someone else. So you have to be super careful to not overdo it. So I shared my reel, and a recruiter for Scripps who hired me said to put the order, that he basically said that everybody like had a Black Lives Matter story in the reels, just because that's what was happening when we were applying. Everybody was talking about COVID when we were applying. So that's why he said to lead with the movies package, like about the Miami film industry, because that's something that he had never seen. And if you're branding yourself as a South Florida based reporter, then you want to obviously share a local story. Like if I had started my reel with a package about the fashion designer when we were in Bolivia, well, then do I even know my own city? And that was a big thing that they mentioned for me. Obviously, there's no right or wrong way to do a reel, but you obviously want to start with your best work. And although that stand up in the protest was not my best work, because I stuttered a little bit because I was very, very nervous, it's you're a human being, you know, like you're not a computer. So that's why I decided to keep it in the reel. And it's like one of the first things that you see. Yeah, it's a little bit of a mistake, but at the end of the day, you know, it's a tense situation. You show that you're human. And I mean, it worked for me.
It did. Ken, what about that? Is there such a thing as too long of a reel? And I get, because that's a question we see. People want an absolute. Make it 7 minutes, 13 seconds. They make it 11 minutes. Is there a length that you think it should be, or what's your view on that?
Well, a rule of thumb is that a news director or a potential person determining whether you get an internship will watch as long as it remains compelling. When it stops being compelling, that's when they pop it out. I did a couple of seminars at radio, TV news conventions with news directors as the judges. And we volunteered, we had volunteers, students submitted their tape, and we didn't screen them, we just popped them in, popped them out. And what we were finding, and the question I asked to the news directors was, when you've seen enough, raise your hand. Well, what surprised me was some of those hands were going up in seconds. And I would stop and say, what's the matter? I don't like how he looks. Okay, you might say that's not fair. Or I didn't like how he sounded. It wasn't compelling. So in order to be more effective, and Victor, I think you have great potential because we've watched enough to see that you're there. The question is, would they get past? Some people will put their best story last. They thought they were building. You can't build. You have to start with your strength. So the first thing on there should work. And then you said something with the feedback you know about the BLM versus COVID versus a people story. I'm looking for a reporter who can take the same story everybody else does and do it better. So I would say, give me a BLM story that has a people angle in it, either from a cop's point of view or a Black person who's been stopped, or a kid that's afraid of police, or a kid that likes police. And the COVID story, the same kind of thing. We see the frustrations, but you find somebody that has a more compelling story. So I wouldn't rule out doing something very contemporary and just showing that you did a better job. You were creative. You found out that you did some research, and you just found out the right elements to make it, you're exhibiting your compassion. At the same time, you're illustrating the depths of the problems and the difficulties in overcoming these things. I would just challenge you. And I think one of the things that will happen in Lafayette, you're going to be mentored. You're going to have a news director because he was smart enough to recognize you've got the basic talent, and they're going to work with you. So I think there's enough there to work with. The question again is getting past that first few seconds, maybe the first 30 seconds. That might be that they didn't see the rest of your work.
And thank you, Ken, and thank you to Manuel Frega from Christopher Columbus for your question. Hope that kind of gives you a sense. make it as long as you want, but make it as compelling and as you can in the process of doing that. Leon Garcia, and maybe Pam, you can take this, from Columbus, wants to know what you can do to make sure there are no mistakes on your demo reel. I've seen it with people when they create a reel and they're taking work and creating a story, but they might have an error in there, a factual error or a grammatical error or something. What can you do to troubleshoot to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, I think right off the bat, you need an editor. You need a second set of eyes to look at your reel, because you get so invested in your work that you don't see the mistakes. Or maybe you need to make your package sharper or shorter. I was on a webinar with the great Steve Hartman, who talked about killing the puppies. And he said, you need to go through your story, and there might be some element in there that you just love, and it's the puppy to you, but somebody else says, you know what? You can take that out and the package is still strong, if not stronger. So I think you need a second set of eyes from a trusted person, trusted advisor, to look at it and help you craft the best reel possible, because you're just so invested in your own work. You might really, really like a shot or a soundbite from somebody that you could do without or isn't strong. And my God, if there's a mistake in there, you need to take it out. You can't leave the mistake. If you recognize that mistake, take it out. If you have the chance to redo something and make it better, do it. I mean, you want to put your best foot forward. I mean, that's what I would say. And at CCNN, my goodness, they have Omar Delgado, who's extraordinary. I mean, I would put everything in front of Omar and say, what do you think? And start and go from there.
Times 100, what Pam said. The work that comes out of there is so extraordinary. And she's right, second set of eyes. I'll take this next question. We're going to try to really rapid fire these, because I'm mindful of our time and your time at home, and we want to get to as many of these as we can. This question, great one, from, let me get my place back here. Where'd I go? Lucas Figueroa, and the demo reel for a competition versus demo reel for a job. I can do that succinctly, I think. I'm not a big fan of a blanket reel. It's, especially nowadays, it's easier to edit, but if you're submitting a competition, say for long form, or maybe you've done an investigation at school or something like that, and then you're applying for a job that is a morning reporter, live shots, feature stories, fun, energy, I don't see how those two reels would really work well together. I think you would have to have separate reels, one for that competition in that case, and one for that particular job. Now, if you're applying for an investigative position, maybe you can harvest some of that material you used in a competition for that. But again, you really have to be clear what the job is that you're going after, and make sure your reel caters to that. Not the job you want to have or you see yourself getting, as my first boss told me when I sent her a reel, and she liked it, obviously, she hired me, but I had other things on there, and she said, don't worry, you won't be doing any of that here. You're an MMJ and you'll be doing that. So I was fortunate in that she liked me, but it might have been a disqualifying factor that some of the material on the reel didn't apply to what I had in mind. I want to get to a few more questions here. Let's see, where'd we go here? No mistakes, competition, the tone of the reel. And I guess by tone we mean, sorry, let me make sure and recognize the person who gave me that good question here. Where are we here? Sorry about that, Anthony Martinez from Christopher Columbus. Thank you for your question. The tone, and I guess that might be along the lines of hard news, feature. I mean, I think that kind of piggybacks on what we said a second ago, but Ken, what do you think about the tone of the reel?
I think the tone should vary, just as we talk about a narration varies in mood and tone depending on the words. I like to see work in my career. One of my goals, as in my reporting days, I wanted to have the lead story and I wanted to have the kicker. In other words, I wanted to have the hardest story of the day, and if possible, the softest. And in those days, we did 3 packages a day, and that was in a 30-minute newscast. But I want to see a range, and I want to be able to judge how did their voice sound when they were covering the funeral of a slain police officer and his family. How did their voice sound when a kid is getting out of the hospital after 2 years of physical therapy and now they're walking? I want to see them be able to, in words, in other words, words talk, I mean, literally and figuratively, but I want to see what words do they use and how do those words sound and what are their facial expressions and the open, the close, the bridge. I want to see that versatility. I don't think it's good to be all hard news or all features. Ultimately, like Steve Hartman, I mean, that's a dream job. I was the Yankee Traveler, did 400 episodes. But while I was doing all of those features, I was also covering hard news. So I want to see on one reel different, you're calling it tone, and yes, I want to see different and hear different tones.
Hey, Craig, can I jump in on that real quick? I'm sorry. And I think this is something that both you and I, when we taught performance, talked about. I mean, this is so important. And when I first started anchoring at WSVN, they were fantastic and sent me to audience research and development. And I worked with an incredible anchor coach there, Nick Daly, who I still keep in touch with to this day. And the things that I learned from Nick helped me to become the anchor that I was. And it's, you have to be, and Ken, you've said this too, you have to be real, you have to be organic, and you have to really care about the story you're talking about. If I'm talking about people who were killed, I can't say 3 people were killed today. It has to be 3 people were killed today. I mean, you have to have a different tone of voice because those people who were killed are somebody's dad or somebody's child. This is serious, and you can't read all your stories with the same tone. Tone is extraordinarily important. I should be able to close my eyes and not even look at the video, and your tone of voice really sets the stage and tells me the story. So Ken's right on with what he's saying, and it sounds easier than it is. It's sort of something you really have to practice, but you definitely have to be invested in your story. Don't just read it. You have to know the story. Don't cold read. You have to understand what it is that you're saying, and you have to care about it, and that's what's going to make the difference.
Particularly important on the anchor desk, you have to connect with the material. I think a viewer can tell if you're just reading words. And we can talk more of that in a bit. I want to get to Macia Leiva from the University of Miami. Should you include English and Spanish if you're bilingual, or English and French, or whatever you might also have? Victor, did you include both on yours? And how did you find that work for you?
Actually, I've made Spanish content, but not enough to put it in a reel. So my English, although I'm perfectly bilingual, I don't have any Spanish like packages or anything like that. So unfortunately for me, if I do want to eventually like go back home, work for Telemundo or whatever, I would have to go out and kind of like be a college student all over again, be 22 without a job and do it, but in Spanish. I've heard, because that was a question that I asked my mentors. They told me to keep it separate. But because more than likely the news director will only be the news director for either the English channel or the Spanish channel. So if it confuses them, then it kind of like turns them off. Then I would keep it away from it. But that was what I was told. I don't know if anybody has a different.
I'd like to interject here. First of all, here in Connecticut, we have stations that operate in English, and they also have Spanish language programming. They're affiliated with one of the Spanish networks, but they run the local news there. So it can be something to have included or to have it separately. But I also want to make a point, and several of you know Belkis Nere. I'm going to share a story. When she came to New Haven, she was up here for 2 years. At the start of her tenure here, she was the only reporter in Connecticut television who could speak Spanish. What was important was we had stories in the Spanish community that reporters who couldn't speak Spanish couldn't cover the stories because they couldn't translate what the people were telling them. And in 1969, I was covering a civil disorder. That's what it was called, even though today we'd call it a riot. And there were people speaking Spanish yelling out of tenement windows. And I didn't know what they were saying. The firemen didn't know what they were saying. Finally, somebody said, "There's a baby up there that needs to go to the hospital." So I think showing that you can at least speak the language doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the job. But today it's a competitive edge, and I am amazed at how many people in this market, which is now the 30th, it used to be the 21st, but how many people here are not bilingual in the sense that they could translate if they were speaking to someone who only spoke Spanish.
So to go back to Ms. Leiva's question, I think certainly on a resume, that would be something you'd want to include, that you were bilingual or multilingual. If you're applying for a job at an English language station, you'll speak English. But to Ken's point, if you're covering a story in different communities where it would be an asset, then you want to make sure you mention that. In fact, very often job postings will ask, or sometimes they'll say they require, which they may or may not, but they say that you're bilingual. So absolutely include that. If you have a story where, to Ken's point, you're in English, but you're using your Spanish to translate an interview, you can include that to show them how well you do that. I think it's nothing but an asset, but if you're applying for a job at the Telemundo station, I don't know that you need to include English language stories as much as you need to include Spanish speaking ones, because you'll be using Spanish on the air there. I want to move to a couple of others. This one's directed at me from Leon Garcia at Christopher Columbus. Was it difficult to become a journalist? You know, like a lot of you, I did exactly what you're doing. I took all the courses in school, newspaper, campus television, nothing like what you have at Columbus, for example. In college, I had an internship. I worked in the mailroom at a television station. I worked in the newsroom as an assistant, and watched and learned and absorbed, and watched and learned and absorbed, and worked holidays and weekends and missed weddings and funerals, because I always wanted to be the guy who was there. And in the end, it worked out. So enough about, I can answer more of that later. I want to get to Maria Molina from American Heritage. Interesting question. Should you include work that shows your growth, your progression? I guess that to mean work that you might have produced when you were first starting out in school versus when you're graduating. I have an opinion, but I'll keep it to myself for a second. Ken, what do you think? Should you, in other words, to show how you've improved, should you show that first package or two you did and then look at how good you are by the end?
They may not get past it. I think it's important to show who you are, not who you were, because they can look and say, if this is your best work today, we can grow it. You know, if it's your best work and they don't think you're going to get any better, I don't think they would want somebody that was that close-minded. But again, it's a time factor. How much time? Now, an agent may be interested in taking a look at that progression, but it speaks to the point of when you are putting a resume reel together, you need to be able to do what we see you doing in that story. Did you have someone who helped you rewrite it? Or were you working with somebody who said, take this out, put this in? Did you edit it yourself, or was it fed back and somebody else actually did the editing? Did you shoot the story? Was it your idea for the story? I want to know what it is you bring to the operation, but you must be able to deliver it. And sometimes people do a great piece, and then they get sometimes a 1 or 2 day sort of an audition. You come on in and work for us for a day or so, and they can't meet the pressures of the deadline, or they can't deliver the quality when they had so much time to fine tune that package. So I'm looking for reality. I want to see where you are, not where you were.
Victor, did you have some thoughts about that, since you most recently put together a reel?
Yeah, I mean, there are stories that kind of eventually just leave your reel because you made something better and you made the most recent. And for example, to my whole point of always making content, if I didn't include a COVID story or a BLM story in my reel, then I'd be outdated. So you have to put the best and the most recent. That's how I would approach it.
Great, and thank you for the brevity. I'm trying to get a lot more in here with our waning few minutes. Cam Dobbs from the University of Miami, great question. Ken, I'm going to throw this to you. Actually, I'll start with Pam, because I know you probably got this in your class at TV Performance. I know I did. Cam asks, when interning, should I only look for specific roles or be open for news as well, even though my goals are sports? So he prefers sports. Should he take a news internship?
Yeah.
And by extension, because the question we would usually get is, I want to be a sports reporter, but there are fewer of those opportunities. Should I take the news reporter job and then hope later to go into sports? Pam, what do you think about that?
Wow, great question. And I know Cam. Cam's amazing. She's a volleyball player, a grad student at the University of Miami. We've taken classes together. She's an extraordinary young woman. So nice to chat with you, Cam. You know what, and Ken may want to bounce in on this as well. I think that you definitely need to show your diversity. I mean, we all know that there's sports reporting, and then there is reporting that the profile piece or the story really is sort of a feature piece, even though it's on a sports personality or something of that nature. So maybe you have 2 reels, and Ken, maybe you can jump in. If you know that you're applying for a sports reporter position or a sports caster, maybe your reel is just all sports. Or if you want to get your foot in the door, you show your diversity and you have both sports and you also have maybe some feature reporting on there as well. I mean, that's extra work on the student's part to make these 2 reels, but maybe you just kind of hone right in and go in for what that news station or news director is looking for. I don't know, Ken, what do you think?
I think you're right on the mark. And I'll give you some illustrations. Right now here in Connecticut, we have several news anchors who were longtime sports anchors. And when you meet them, and I know them all, they all say, it's all news. The topic may be sports, but the techniques and the emotion that you're trying to get. I mean, if I'm a news reporter, and I was so many times assigned to a sports situation, I wanted to get the same kind of a people angle, the same kind of emotion. But a lot of sports today is business news. It's also involved heavily in diversity and protest. So the blend, I don't see a separation. Your expertise may be in a specific sport or two. Rarely does somebody know all sports. But the idea is, can I cover it? Can I make it interesting? Can I make a sports fan appreciate it? I'm also seeing that in newspaper writing, print writing. They're writing stories that non-sports fans are reading. And I also say when I did a sports story, yes, it's a feature in some sense, but often it's hard news, it's economic impact. But I also, again, I look at it today through the lens of civil rights and how much the athletic world, the athletes are leading that. So many sportscasts these days turn out to be, in effect, news.
Agreed with what everyone there had to say. And I would just go on to say, whether it's the internship or the opportunity to be in an environment, because in a lot of environments, they're doing away with local sports. Even in environments in smaller markets where they have a sports staff, it might be 2 people, whereas you might have 8 or 9 people on the news staff. So you have more of a likelihood to get hired if you are able to do both. And my experience with people I've worked with or students or whatnot, some have gone in on the news route but wound up in sports. Some went into news and actually liked it and they're sticking with it. And to Ken's point, some did sports for many years and then found better opportunity doing news. So it's the ability, and I think Ken made the point early on, the more you can do, the more versatile you can be, the more likely you can have a longer, more robust career in the business.
Craig, one other aspect is often
Real quick.
On Friday night, they cover all the football games. Well, a lot of those photographers are news photographers. So your ability to cover sports just with the camera is very, very important. You got to know enough about the game to figure out where the ball's going. But in any event, sports photography is a competitive edge.
Very true, very true. I think as an MMG, I might have shot some high school sports at one point. Scary thought there. Maria Molina had asked a 2-part question, so I want to go back to her second part, which was, what should freshmen do when they dive into anything you're able? I mean, obviously your academics are most important, but if yearbook, if there's campus television, newspaper, anything you can do to build on your experience and build on your reel potentially. And I think it's important, especially because let's say you're at a place like UM where there is a UM TV and you can be a part of that. And I know you have it at other institutions too. The work you crank out as a freshman or a sophomore, it's all practice, is going to be material that you will want to hide away in a safe compared to the work you do by the time you graduate. So the more you do it, the more you flex the muscle, the more you write, the more you shoot, the more you edit, the stronger you will be. So I think the earlier you can begin, the better off you will be. But dive in right away. Freshman year, don't wait. I used to weep when I'd have seniors in my class say, should I be involved with UMTV? I'm like, where have you been? You're paying a fortune to go here. Get in there and do the work and make some stuff for your reel. All right, end of spiel. I have to keep to time. So I'll start with Victor. 30 seconds or less. Your closing thoughts as we talk about resumes, cover letters, and reels. Victor, first you.
Yeah, for sure. So if you can take anything from what I've said today, take this. Build yourself a little board of trustees, include one of your parents, include somebody that has no idea what news television, like how it works or anything like that, and somebody that you trust that like for everything. And then have them watch every single thing that you do. Have them read every single thing that you do. And in that sense, then you'll always be getting better. Start early. If you don't have to wait to be a senior to, like Craig was saying, I joined Panther now at FIU, and it's one of the coolest things. It's something that really, really helped my skills. And honestly, just don't give up. It's gonna be tough. I really thought, I was like, you know what? I'll just be a barista the rest of my life. But just keep applying, keep doing it, and it's gonna happen.
Victor, thanks. And real quick, if you want to share your email in case people have follow-up questions after we finish here.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's my last name, first name. So Georges Victor, Jorges, Victor @gmail.com. And that's it. Anything you guys need, let me know. I'll try to give you some feedback there.
Awesome, Victor. Thank you. Pam, to you real quick.
Yeah, I mean, just to keep it quick, look, it's like I said at the beginning, is that attitude plus opportunity equals success. Whatever you do is going to add to your skill set, and be ready to pivot at any moment. I mean, when I was at WSVN, I started as an overnight writer, 1:30 to 9:30 in the morning. It stunk. It's horrible, but I did it because I wanted to be in the business. When I got promoted to dayside writer, I was like, yeah, this is great. But I kept going, and I had the opportunity to take that on-air traffic experience that I told you about and turn it into an on-air weathercaster experience. Craig, you might remember this. Jillian Barbary was leaving, and Brian Greif, our news director, came to me and said, I just need somebody to fill in. And I was like, sure, I'll read poetry on the air. Whatever you want me to do, give me an opportunity to show you my skills. And so thank God the Weather Channel, we had cable. I watched the Weather Channel night and day. I took a meteorology course at FIU. I really thought that maybe my direction would go in weather, and I made it work for myself. And then one day somebody needed to fill in on the weekend, Saturday morning to anchor the weekend morning show. And I go, I'll do it. That changed the course of my life. So from doing weather, then to taking this opportunity, I could have said, I want to sleep in. I don't want to do it. No, but I did it. And that trajectory pushed me moved me into anchoring and reporting. So attitude plus opportunity equals success. Remember that. Give yourself some grace while you're doing this. You're going to make a ton of mistakes, but just, pat yourself off, just shake it off and keep moving. And if you want it bad enough, you're going to make it.
And Pam, is there an email you can share with us real quick for folks who might want to reach out?
Sure. Yep. You could do pgiganti@miami.edu. So PGIGANTI. It looks like gigantic without a C on the end @miami.edu.
Pam, thank you so much. And Ken, some quick closing thoughts from you.
Don't give up. Somewhere in my basement, I'm a pack rat. There's a box of rejection letters from trying to get the first job out of college. There's probably 150 in there. And one day I'll take them out and read them. But when I have read them, it's amazing who rejected me. And I got even with some of them. But don't give up. Don't accept people telling you journalism is dead or dying, broadcast journalism. The forms change, the demands change, but the need for good people, that doesn't change. That is what we need. Be positive about your future. Some of you may need second jobs that are with the permission of your news director or the general manager. You may need a second job to supplement the starting pay, which can be rough. But where there's a will, there's a way, and you will have careers. And Craig, I think you're a good example. You've gone from MMJ in Fort Myers, I believe, to seriously a superstar in an incredibly competitive market. You have survived ownership changes and all the network stuff and so much. And it's because, number one, you're a good person, but I really do believe that grounding you got. Your first job is not the one you will retire from. I will bet the farm on that.
Ken, thank you for the very kind words. And yes, that's a real quick, the point I would make in my closing remarks. Ken, an email for folks who might want to reach out to you real quick?
Yeah, my preference would be to reach me on Facebook Messenger because my emails are just too many of them. But on Facebook, facebook.com/KENNVENIT. or you can just do a search for Ken, Kenn, Venit, and up will come Facebook and everything else. But I'm very good with Facebook Messenger, and since I'm still getting used to the replacement for my flip phone, I find the Messenger works better than email.
And I'll vouch for that. He's very good on Facebook Messenger. Thank you, Ken, and thank you all for offering your time on a Saturday and your insight. My email is cstevens@wsvn.com, just first initial, last name @wsvn.com. My final thoughts, I'll just summarize what I was hoping you would get from this. As far as your resume reel, your best stuff first. Make it as long as you want, because if they like it, they're going to watch it. And if they don't, well, they're going to go on to the next one. The letter, try to customize it for each job. Get the boss's name spelled right. Get the title spelled right. Try to indicate you're at least you have a passing familiarity with their television station and the community they serve. You can do that with the internet now. That's easy. The resume, short, sweet, relevant. Include your references and make sure you've asked ahead of time that they can be included, and make sure when you include those names, their title, their phone number, their contact information is correct. One thing we didn't get to, but I want to get to, is the thank you note. A lot of television is about relationships and building relationships that span, as anybody here will tell you, the length of your career. And there's nothing wrong with, even if you don't get the job, but if they took time to look at your work and acknowledge it, thank you for considering me. I hope I'm a better fit in the future. Thank you for your tips and your feedback, whatever. Personally, I like the handwritten thank you note because no one does them anymore, but I think it stands out. But if you don't have time or whatever, email, I guess, is okay, but send the thank you note. It'll stick out because not a lot of people do that, unfortunately. So with that, good luck. You now, in your network of people, all of you at home, you have the four of us as contacts as you build your careers. So stay in touch, and best wishes for great success. And now to Sarah.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. This information was invaluable. I don't think that these are things you could just learn from, looking things up on the internet or reading something in a textbook. So thank you so much for this information. And I encourage all of the young professionals and students and teachers to refer back to this session. I think that it's just such an amazing reference for us to have and a source. And thank you all for sharing your emails too. That's incredible to have access to you guys after the fact. So I want to thank our moderator, Craig Stevens, and our panelists, Pam, Victor, and Ken. Thank you to our facilitators, Omar and Mia, and our Suncoast production team. And of course, a big thank you to everybody who joined us this morning. Our next webinar in this series is going to be Reputable Reporting in Tough Times, which will take place on Saturday, February 20th. So for more information on our webinar series, the other things that I discussed earlier in the opening, about our call for entries and the scholarships, you could go to our website, suncoastchapter.org. Thank you, everybody.